Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Cullen, and I am going to talk to you a little bit about motivational interviewing. Some of the things to think about in terms of motivational interviewing, first, obviously as a clinician, is to think about the goals of motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is a process through which we work with clients, talk to clients. It's an interviewing process where we, as we're building trust and building relationships with clients, not only encourage them to list out and maintain goals, but we figure out ways and we create encouragement and positive support, as well as some situations where we challenge clients in ways that still uses a strengths-based approach. So for example, when we're building empathy with clients, we use reflective listening so that it is clear to the client that we care about them and that we're listening to their story, and we're listening to the story the way they want us to understand the story. But it's more than just listening to a story, and it's more than just having the clients list out goals for us. The job of a clinician is to help them in the change process. And part of what we do in order to help them in the change process is to point out and identify things like discrepancies or resistance. But we also provide encouragement and acceptance. So while we're talking to clients about discrepancies between the behaviors that they currently engage in and the goals that they have for their lives, and when we talk to them about the resistance that we may be seeing in terms of the changes that they want to make versus the things that they're doing and the behaviors that they're engaging in, they get in the way of them making the changes they need. Instead of doing it through argumentation or through challenging in a negative way, we do it in a way that's encouraging and accepting and helping clients learn how to validate their feelings, identify the fears or the barriers to the change process that may be impeding their ability to reach their goals, and to also provide encouragement and strength and to support them to be their cheerleaders so that they know we do believe in them and believe that the change is imminent. One of the things we do through motivational interviewing is provide collaboration, and we compliment them, and we listen rather than telling them to do things, which sometimes is a challenge for us because we as clinicians often are the people that a client will come to look for the answers, and it's not our job to tell the clients what the answers are. We need to believe that each client and each individual that we work with has the power and the capacity within themselves to change. And it's our job to collaborate with the client, to be a consultant of sorts, where we provide them with some insight to what we perceive as being barriers to their change process, but also challenge them slightly in a way that's positive and encouraging and validating the struggle that they're engaged in. One of the things to keep in mind when we're thinking about the goals of motivational interviewing is that motivational interviewing really got some of its start from the process of helping people stop smoking. So the smoking cessation programs are really part of where the authors Prochaska and DiClemente received most of their data in support of the concept of change processes and the ideas of how to use motivational interviewing in the change process. So it's important to keep in mind that when we think about how to use motivational interviewing, it's based on an idea that is predicated on a change process. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about the change process and what the stages of change are, and talk about how that relates so closely to the concept of motivational interviewing. Now I'd like you to take a minute and look at a video on the spirit of motivational interviewing and really what the strengths-based approach and the emphasis on how to build positivity comes from the spirit that the clinician brings to the motivational interviewing practice. The second thing we're going to look at is the client's role. What is happening for the client? Assess where they are in the change process. What are the questions to ask each person at that stage? And to think about how to use the process of understanding clients and think about why this client may be at a particular stage in the change process, what is keeping them from moving to other stages of the change process, as well as how to use motivational interviewing questions to prompt, encourage, and support along the way. So for example, if you think about the change process as I've outlined here in this figure, it's really a cycle of change that is different from some of the linear models of change that make the assumption that when someone makes the decision to change, that they will continue to move forward in an upward and positive direction. One of the things that through the substance use treatment modalities as well as the smoking cessation modalities that individuals who are thinking about change processes in Prochaska and DiClemente realized was that it's really more of a cycle, and that where you start in the cycle changes as you move forward and progress in your goals. So most people start at the pre-contemplation stage, and that's the stage of the change process where individuals are hesitant to even admit that there's a problem. Often there's an awful lot of denial and discussion of, if you think about it from a substance use example, that they have control of their substance use and that they are able to control and stop whenever they would like to. So there's a lot of denial in the pre-contemplation phase. In the contemplation phase, you begin to help the client learn that there is a problem, there is a challenge, there is a struggle, there is an issue, there's a situation that the client wants to change. And they begin to think about the possibilities of change. Often in our contemplation stage, we'll look at the pros and cons of continuing the behavior, because the reality is that many of the behaviors we engage in have been reinforced somewhere along the line, so that the contemplation stage really involves the client beginning to understand that there are some reasons that they engage in the behaviors, and even though there may be many reasons that they should stop the behaviors, something about the reinforcing patterns of that behavior, or there's something that keeps them engaging in a behavior. So for example, if we think of it again from the substance use narrative, we think about there is something that the client benefits from in terms of the substance use. So if they are particularly depressed, then the substance use might be something that helps them feel better, helps them feel positive, helps them feel more supportive. So the contemplation phase is really where we start to look at with the client in a collaborative way, what are some of the things that they want to do differently. The preparation stage is where we start to make some planning. The individual has moved from just thinking about change to actually preparing for change and thinking about what are some of the changes they're going to need to make. Things like getting rid of all of the alcohol in their apartment, things like putting together some support groups, thinking about learning some information about rehabilitation centers, etc. That's the preparation stage. And then we get to the action stage, and that's where the real work with the client in a collaborative process that involves encouragement and constant reinforcement and support in a positive way that helps the individual continue to stay in an action phase, so they're actually engaged in making the changes they need to make. The maintenance stage, hopefully when the change is underway, we begin to create some goals for maintenance, and then the behavior becomes stable. The reality is that sometimes there's a relapse, but it doesn't necessarily mean the person starts all the way from the beginning of pre-contemplation. It may just mean they start at contemplation again and start thinking about what were the things that caused them to relapse and how do we prepare to move forward so that those things don't happen again, and then begin a new action plan. So that's what makes the cycle piece, because as part of the change process and as clinicians engaged in the change process, we help clients understand that the relapse part of the change process is a natural part of it, and there's no shame in that. And that's part of the motivational interviewing piece, is learning how to ask questions of a client that are positive, encouraging, but help them understand that we understand that they're humans and that we're there to help positively support them as they continue to move on in their process towards the goals that they want to work on. So now I'd like you to look at a video about the client stage. What are some of the things that the client is expected to think about and work on, and what are some of our goals for the clients in this stage of the process? In motivational interviewing, the clinician techniques are called OARs. open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective statements, and summaries. So that's one way to remember what our techniques are: asking open-ended questions, using affirmations, forming reflective statements, and providing summaries. Open-ended statements help us, and open-ended questions help us to explore the client's story further. It gives us an opportunity to build rapport with the client and encourage elaboration. And we want to ask questions that are not yes or no questions, but are open-ended questions like the ones listed here on this slide. The second part, the A of OARS, is affirmation. We want to constantly be providing encouragement to them so that we can build that rapport, build that safety, build the trust, but we're not talking about being proud of them. And the reason we're not talking about being proud of them is because we want to think about this as a collaborative process that encourages empowerment. And in this process, we want the individuals to learn to be proud of themselves. And so we want to ask them questions like, how did that feel? That must have been really difficult, and now you were able to make some positive changes. That's really wonderful for you. That must feel really wonderful. How do you feel in this moment? We want to create opportunities for them to reflect on their abilities, reflect on the things that they've done well, and positively reinforce themselves. So we want to create opportunities for self-affirmation, asking them questions like, what are the changes made that you've made been like for you? What have you noticed about yourself in the past few months that is different from what you've started out as? Then we want to provide some reflective statements. That's where we talk to the clients in a way that reflects back to them in their own words what it is that we're communicating and what they're communicating to us. So we want to understand and communicate to them that we understand what it is that they're explaining to us. So we say things like, so what I'm hearing is, or is it true that what you're saying is? And then we get them to validate back what it is we believe they're saying. This is an opportunity for us to clarify that we understand the meaning of their statements, and it's also a good way for the clients to clarify that they've explained themselves well. Finally, in terms of OARS, is the summarization. We want to summarize the purpose, look at the progress that's happened, talk about the important ideas and facts, talk about further discussion and what the client wants to continue to work on. Think about action in terms of the major ideas that have been expressed and the feelings that have happened throughout your work with the client. And then talking to them about some of the key ideas that you see are coming forward in terms of things they want to continue to work on, they want to change further, or just changes in their goals and objectives over the course of time. So this is an opportunity for you to really summarize where you have gone and come from with the client, as well as the direction for where you're going with the client. Now I'd like you to look at this video on OARS. This video that I've included here is an example of motivational interviewing in action. I'd like you to watch this video, and I'd like you to think about the stages of change that we talked about earlier. What stage of change do you think this individual is in? Think about what some of the barriers may be to her in terms of her change process. And I want you to think about also some of the techniques that you see the clinician using. So going back to the beginning of this PowerPoint, thinking about the different goals of motivational interviewing, thinking about the OARS, which are the techniques that the clinician is using, and being able to identify them and see where you feel that this client and clinician worked well together and where you think maybe some changes might be needed. When we meet this coming week, we'll be able to go over a case example. We'll review the following case, and I'm hoping you review it ahead of time so that we can use the wellness worksheet to think about the client. And I want to do some practice with the wellness worksheet when we get together. We'll talk about the PowerPoint and some of your questions that you might have, thinking about the substance use change model that I'm attaching to this particular end. I'd like you to take a look at the website that I have listed in the end of this PowerPoint slide and think about and be prepared to discuss it when I meet with you this week. So please use this final page of the PowerPoint to begin to prepare for our meeting this week. I look forward to seeing everyone. I'll see you soon.